Hello everyone, and welcome once again to my channel. Today we'll be learning how to solve quadratic equations by using completing the square method. And one of my other videos, I did a video on how to solve quadratic equations using factorization method, but today we want to look at how we can solve quadratic equations using completing the square method. Now, this method is applied where factorization method is not possible. It seeks to make the given equation a perfect square, which can be factorized. So what we're going to do here is trying to make this equation into a perfect square so that it can be easily factorized. Now, we have just one example. I want you to follow this example very closely, the steps very closely so that you have a better understanding. Now, it says we should solve 2x squared plus 3x minus 8 equals to 0 by completing the square method. So we're going to use completing the square method to solve this quadratic equation. Now, the first thing you do here, the first thing you do in this equation is to ensure that the coefficient of the highest power is equal to 1. Ensure that the coefficient of the highest power, which is x squared, ensure that it is what? Equals to 1. And you can see here that the coefficient of x squared is not equal to 1. It's actually 2. So you have to ensure that it is equal to 1. How do you do that? By dividing all through by 2. You divide the entire equation by 2 so that the equation of x squared will be equal to 2. So you now write 2x squared all over 2 plus 3x all over 2 minus 8 all over 2 is equal to 0. So when you do that, here cancel, you now have x squared plus 3 over 2x minus 4 equals to 0. So now the coefficient of x squared is equal to 1. So let's proceed. Now, once you've done that, the next thing you do is you move the constant. You move the constant to the right hand side, that is over the equal sign. You move this constant. This is the constant here. This is the constant. Constant is minus 4. Take note of the signs. You move this constant to the right hand side. And when you do that, you're going to be left with what? X squared plus 3 over 2x. You have the equal sign. Then what do you have? This is minus 4. When it goes over the equal sign to the right hand side, it becomes plus 4. Hope you're following me so far. So you move the constant to the right hand side. Now, what are you going to do next? The next thing you're going to do is you add the square of half of the coefficient of x to both sides of the equation. Now you have two sides of the equation. You have the left hand side and you have the right hand side. So what you do next is you add the square of half of the coefficient of x to both sides of the equation. Now, the coefficient of x is 3 over 2. So if you have 3 over 2, you're going to add half of 3 over 2, half of the square of half. You're going to add the square of half of 3 over 2 to both sides. Okay? So that will now give us 3 over 2x. You add, what is half of 3 over 2? Half of 3 over 2 is 3 over 4. If you know how to your fractions very well, you know that half of 3 over 2 is 3 over 4, and then you now square it. So you add half of the square of the coefficient of x to both sides. So this is the left hand side. You now do the same on the right hand side. You add half the square of coefficient of x, which is this. So you add the square of the coefficient of x to both sides. That will give you what we have on the board. So now, on the left hand side, we take two terms under squares while we perform arithmetic operations on the right hand side. Now, you can see here on the left hand side of this equation, you have x squared and you have 3 over 4 squared. So what do? They are like terms now. They are now what? Like terms. So what do? You now collect them together. This will effectively be the factorization of this left hand side of this equation. So what you do, you now take the common terms. Since they are this and this are square, you collect them as like terms. You now say x here, that is this x, plus 3 over 4, you put it in brackets, and then you square it. So that has effectively, settled the left hand side. You've completed the factorization of the left hand side, and you write your equal sign. Then on the right hand side, what do? You do your arithmetic calculations. 4 plus, what is 3 over 4 raised to power 2? 3 over 4 raised to power 2 will give you what? 9 over 16. And then you go on to what? To complete the sum of that. Let me write it on this side. We have x plus 3 over 4 in bracket square is equals to, when you solve this, it's going to give you 73 all over 16. Okay, now what do we do after this? Now, the next thing you do after this is to square both sides, because you want to remove this square root here. This is square. This is a square, sorry. Now, you want to remove this square. So what you're going to do is you're going to find the square root of both sides. You find the square root of both sides, and of course, you know that if you find the square root of an expression that has a square, it will effectively cancel that square. So if you find the square root of both sides, say, let me write it here, find the square root of both sides. Find the square root of both sides. When you find the square root of the left hand side, because there's a square here, it will effectively cancel that square. So when you find the square root of this, it will be what you will have left is x plus 3 over 4. Because the square root will cancel this, we eliminate the square. But on this side, since you don't have any square here, the square root sign will now take effect. We give you this 73 all over 16. Now, whenever we're asked to find the square root of a number, we usually write in front of the square root a positive and a negative sign. Especially in this case. Why? Because we're dealing with perfect squares, and because we want to, find the positive and the negative squares of this value. So also always remember to put your positive and your negative sign. So now, let's look at the right hand side for a bit. You can see that in the right hand side, we have the square root of a fraction. The numerator here doesn't have any square because 73 doesn't have any square roots. But the denominator has a square root. Why? Because 16 has a square root of 4. So because of that, we're going to write this expression as let's write this expression as x plus 3 over 4 is equals to plus or minus. We put the square root on the numerator, and then we find the square root of the denominator, which will give you what? 4. Because of 16 has a square root of 4, we find the square root of 16, which will give us 4, which will now change the expression to this form. Okay, let's continue. Now, the next thing we're going to do now is to make x the subject of the formula. Make x subject of the formula. And to do that, what we're going to do, we're going to move this 3 plus 3 over 4, we're going to move it to the right hand side because we want to make x the subject of the formula. So we move plus 3 over 4 to the right hand side, and that will now give us x will now be equal to what? Minus 3 all over 4, because here it was positive. When it moves to the right hand side, it becomes negative. We now have plus or minus, which is here, root 73 all over 4. Write it well, 3 over 4. I hope we are following. So now that we have made x the formula, we now simplify the equation. We now say, okay, x will now be equals to minus 3 over 4 plus minus, what is the square root of 73? You can use your calculator to get that. The closest answer you can get is 8.5. The square root of 73 is about 8.5 all over 4. 8.5 all over 4. So now we're going to derive our two answers for x. Now you can see something here very, very interesting here. We have minus 3 all over 4 plus or minus 8.5 all over 4. Now this is a fraction while this is another fraction. So you number your fractions. When we talk about like fractions and unlike fractions. Like fractions, they have the same number of what? Denominator. And when you're adding or subtracting like fractions, it's always very easy. So in this case, now what do you do now? You now what? You now convert this to be just one fraction. And I'll show you how you do that now. The way you convert it to be just one fraction, they have the same number of denominators. You make them into be what? One fraction by saying minus 3 plus or minus 8.5 all over 4. Since here is 4 and here is 4, we combine them together to get what we have here. So now, remember we're dealing with quadratic equations, which means that we're going to have two answers, right? So now we're going to split this into two so we can get our two different answers. So now the first one is x is equals to minus 3. Let's take the positive first, plus 8.5 all over 4, or x is equals to minus 3 minus, take the second one, which is minus here, 8.5 all over 4. So for here, what is minus 3 plus 8.5? It will give you 5.5 over 4. Then what is minus 3 minus 8.5 will give you what? 11.5 all over 4. So based on what we have here, you say what is 5.5 divided by 4? It will give us x is equals to 1.4. Then the second one is, what is 11.5 divided by 4? 11.5 divided by 4 will give you about minus, let me say 2.9. 2.9. All of our answers are to one decimal place. So that is how you solve quadratic equation using completing the square method. It seems a bit elaborate, and it is elaborate, but if you continue this process, doing a lot of examples on it, following the stage step by step, the way I did it on the video, in case you missed a step, you can go back and rewatch the video and remind yourself. But if you do a lot of examples on it, then I'm sure it will get a bit clearer and becomes much more easier for you to, be able to solve quadratic equations by using completing the square method. So that's all for today. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and a thumbs up. If you have any questions, drop it on the comment section. and also hit the notification bell for whenever I drop my next video. Thank you and see you next time.